Hello. Thank you for tuning in and welcome to Real Talk About the Town, an online platform where candidates in the November general election respond to questions provided by the Brotherhood of Elders Network, which are critical to the future of communities of color. My name is Spencer Whitney, and I'm here to help you understand the process and let you know how viewers of this online forum can voice their opinion. All of the mayoral and school board candidates were invited to participate and were sent a list of questions. Candidates' responses are posted here. Inappropriate material has been deleted. Mayoral candidates Ignacio de la Fuente, Tyron Jordan, and Trevor Reed did not submit responses by the deadline. School board candidates Michael D. Hutchinson and Joel Velasquez did not submit responses by the deadline. Since the initial invitation, Peter Liu has made a number of anti-Semitic, racist, and homophobic comments. Therefore, he is not a participant in the forum. Our online forum also provides a venue that allows you to respond to what you have heard from the candidates. Simply make a recording of your response that is no longer than 3 minutes and email it to candidatesforum@brotherhoodofelders.net. Answers longer than 3 minutes will be edited and inappropriate material will be deleted. The Brotherhood of Elders Network is an intergenerational network of men of African descent whose mission is to foster environments where Black males are empowered to flourish by engaging in advocacy, leveraging resources and relationships to benefit Black boys, and maintaining cultural connections to African heritage. To access more information about Real Talk About the Town, please visit brotherhoodofelders.net. The issue of public safety is on the minds of many, with varying philosophies for developing solutions. If you were elected mayor, please outline how you would address prevention, suppression, trauma-informed solutions, and mental illness as it relates to crime.
This response is in regards to public safety. We all know that Oakland is facing a public safety crisis, and as your next mayor, I will address this problem with the urgency that it requires. I've created a 4-pronged public safety plan for Oakland under the Tao administration. The first prong is around education, training, and jobs. A few weeks ago, I was invited to join elected officials across the country to announce a report issued by the New York City public advocate, Jumaine Williams, titled Reimagining Gun Violence Prevention and Public Safety for New York City. The report highlighted specific data-driven investments and policies that cities can pass to reduce gun violence. One part of the report highlighted how youth-centered job programs impact crime. In the effects of youth employment on crime, evidence from New York City lotteries researchers found that youth who participated in summer youth employment programming during the duration of the summer decreased their chance of being arrested by 17%. Their chance of being arrested for a felony by 23%, and their chance of being convicted of committing a crime by 31%. Public safety begins with great schools programs that provide pathways to educational and economic mobility and jobs that offer more than just a living wage. Opportunities like these create the foundation for safe communities. We must invest in a Department of Children, Youth, and Families to focus on the needs of Oakland families, creating pipelines and apprenticeships for local residents to access vocational training, and the City of Oakland departments, which will simultaneously help address the large vacancy rates at City Hall. We must also expand and invest in our community college programs, such as Merit College's OPD pipeline programs, so we are recruiting, training, and filling vacancies at the City of Oakland and in our police department with residents from Oakland. Prong number 2 is around prevention, enforcement, and justice. Preventing crime and violence in Oakland is absolutely critical. We must expand the violence prevention work we have already started and improve on how our police department functions to affect real change. First, we must expand the Mobile Assistance Community Responders of Oakland, MACRO, which I have been an early champion for, so that we can make sure that they are responding to the nonviolent mental health calls and other non-criminal 911 calls. I'm the only mayoral candidate to have invested in $18 million of funding for violence prevention and violence interrupters. And as mayor, I will double the budget of the Department of Violence Prevention and reinvest in and expand ceasefire. I would also implement an active interagency task force to get the violent offenders and guns off our streets immediately. Provide more resources to the Police Commission and Community Police Review Agency and the City Auditor's Office to ensure that OPD is adhering to constitutional policing practices and using their resources to make our community safer with responsible overtime budgeting. Prong number 3 is around holistic community building and investments. We will make Oakland safer by activating our public spaces and delivering timely services to the community. We need robust and equitable investments and enforcement across the whole city. Examples of this include expanding investments in and supporting our schools, community recreation centers, playgrounds, and parks, after school and summer programmings, cultural and public spaces, and local businesses so that we can support active and vibrant neighborhoods all across Oakland. Strategically, we must assign the community resource officers to build relationships with neighborhoods in most need and invest in and support improved service delivery in our neighborhoods to address neighborhood crime issues, as well as removing abandoned cars, trash, and other blight in a timely manner. Prong number 4 is around equity and reform. We must build trust and better relationships between our police department and the Oaklanders they serve. Example of which include investing in our neighborhood councils so they can be platforms for hyperlocal civic participation in our city and to ensure residents are being heard and their concerns are acted on appropriately. We must also implement key accountability metrics for all city departments to ensure a culture of transparency in every corner of Oakland city government. Together, Oakland can be a model for justice and accountability. We need to work together as a community immediately to make Oakland the national leader it can be in being truly a safe and just community.
Hi, my name is Lauren Taylor. I'm a third-generation Oaklander, product of this town, and I would love to have your vote to become Oakland's next mayor. Here in Oakland, we are dealing with unprecedented levels of violence and crime, where many of our residents, our family members, and friends are afraid to go out of their homes at night or in the daytime. Government's number one job is to keep us safe. Yet when young fathers are being shot in front of their 7-year-old sons, an elderly Chinese dentist is shot in her car in Little Saigon, those acts of violence are completely unacceptable. As a Black man born and raised right here in Oakland in the 80s and the 90s, I've been a victim of street violence and unconstitutional policing. I know the balance that we have to have, focusing on near-term immediate response and addressing root causes of crime, because we know that hurt people, and yet love people. And so our job is to bring the healing and the love that also ensures the long-term sustainability of the change and the reduction in public safety issues. By aggregating thousands of conversations, I have developed a 10-point plan for addressing public safety. That includes as co-chair of the Reimagining Public Safety. By aggregating thousands of conversations that I've had over the past 4 years, including as co-chair of Oakland's Reimagining Public Safety Task Force, I have developed a 10-point plan. Elements of that plan include doubling the violence prevention and crime deterrence programs that we know are working, more quickly and more efficiently solving the violent crimes that exist and are taking place on our streets, bringing the healing that's necessary to victims and victims' families, drastically increasing mental health resources that are accessible on the ground in community here in Oakland, bringing citywide conflict resolution training for youth and young adults, having the restorative justice programming that's already been taking place in some of our schools, having that go citywide for all ages. Also ensuring that our efforts to exit from the 20-year negotiated settlement agreement from the Riders case end up successful and that we exit within the first year. I know that we can, we will, and we must deliver for our residents. I will do so as Oakland's next mayor with deep community connection, compassion, a clear constitution of what actions and behaviors will not be tolerated, and the consistency to deliver those results. I will deliver the full continuum of solutions from violence prevention to crime deterrence, immediate crisis response, and thorough follow-up investigations. We will secure the dollars necessary to support us, not just from our own coffers, but partnering with other agencies and other partners, both philanthropic as well as corporate. We will ensure those dollars get to the places where they can have the most impact, our frontline healers. We will strengthen the partnerships and alliances that make that effective. I look forward to leading and partnering with you in delivering the safer Oakland that we all deserve.
First, I think there's a basic premise that law enforcement is what we do to people. Public safety is what we do with people. I believe that if we took all of our resources in this community, from the Department of Violence Prevention to our faith community to nonprofits who make up our safety net, that we can do a lot to make ourselves safer. So the first thing I want to mention is that I believe that we should have a mental health and prevention-based response to all of what is going on. And by creating a behavioral health unit inside the Department of Violence Prevention, we would move in that direction. Number two, I think we should fully implement the Mobile Assistance Community Responders of Oakland program, the MACRO program, which allows city staff from the police department, non-sworn officers, people without a badge and without a gun, to respond to mental health and social service issues in our community. Third, I think we should create a community ambassadors program where those teams respond to nonviolent, non-mental health incidents, and that those responses are grounded in culturally based practice, the practice that the Brotherhood of Elders Network and Healing Generations Institute have been working with, transformative mentoring from the Mentoring Center, restorative justice like the Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth program, and other programs that are grounded in Native American, African American, Latinx, and API culture. I believe that if we do that, that we've given ourselves an opportunity to prevent violent crimes, to provide opportunities for young people to go forward. I think that one of the central things we could do differently with our Department of Violence Prevention is to ensure that it is essentially a jobs program for two sets of people. One, for our formerly incarcerated returning citizens, to make sure that we hire our brothers and sisters who are coming back into our communities, who know the streets, who know the challenges, who know the young people many times who are causing some of the most problem out of economic desperation, that they can work with those young people in the same way that we work with young people in the city of Richmond. In late 2008, we developed a Office of Neighborhood Safety with the Richmond City Manager's Office and other players in that city. Myself, David Muhammad, Devon Bogan, and others helped create that office. And within the first 5 years of its operation, we reduced homicides in the city of Richmond by 70%. The Office of Department of Violence Prevention here in Oakland is modeled on the same idea, but has lost some of the fidelity, some of the consistency with that same model. And so with that, I think that we add more prevention dollars, more opportunities for young people to find gateways to education, to entrepreneurship, to careers that take them out of the financial need, the financial reasons that often young people in this community do property crimes. Those are among the things that I think we should do on preventing violence and making ourselves safer.
Hello, I'm Elisa Victory Villanueva, and as Oakland's next mayor, I will increase investments in peace, including crafting a budget that reflects higher investments in our Department of Violence Prevention, our youth, and equitable economic opportunity. Public safety must be a civil right. I will make this a reality for Oakland by ensuring that our administration serves with constitutional and equitable policing, adequate investments in violence prevention programs, and provision of victim services in partnership with our county and different community serving organizations. I will create a health liaison position to better help us communicate, coordinate, and navigate all of our county resources and partnerships that should be intended to address violence and healing. I will staff all of our city departments to deliver high quality services throughout our city. The Department of Violence Prevention is one of our newest, and it has a high vacancy rate. We need to staff this department to be able to provide more trauma-informed care, more healing services in partnership with community clinics and organizations already doing this work, to partner with our school district as well as with Alameda County. As a criminal justice attorney, I have been working to establish appropriate diversion, mental health, healing, and victim services programs with our county criminal justice leaders. I'm already working with a majority of our school board candidates running to be your next school board leadership. We are partnering to ensure that the city and the school board is able to deliver health, healing, counseling, and trauma-informed services to our youth, to our schools, especially in the wake of violence and shootings that we're seeing occurring on our school campuses. Please vote victory this November. victoryforoakland.com.
Answer to question on public safety. Crime cannot be, quote, suppressed, contrary to what many others claim. The attempts to do so, in one way or another, lead to Fortress America. We need to get to the root causes of crime, which are poverty and alienation. A first step towards resolving this is a $28 an hour minimum wage. At the same time, we need to organize and build democratically elected and community worker-based committees of public safety, which are publicly funded in order to deal with safety in all its aspects, including both individual crime and mental illness. And one last point. The real crime in Oakland is such things as the jacking up of rents to $2,000 and $3,000 a month. We must not be distracted from this sort of legal crime.
Thank you, Brotherhood of Elders, for this opportunity to interview and send this vlog for questions and for this unique platform to share with you. So first, we're going to start with public safety. If you go to my website, I'm an advocate for 900 police officers, an increase in investment in getting off of the negotiated settlement agreement. This agreement has handicapped Oakland for the past 10 years to the tune of $850,000 a year for the trusteeship of that department. We need to make sure that we stop being ambiguous in terms of our support for public safety. For example, we can't even come to an agreement of facts if crime's up or not. Well, it's up. So we need to take that seriously. Also, when you're supposed to have 1,100 police officers by formula, and you have about half of that, and you have no rule of law where the average response time for a 911, even to pick up the phone, is nearly 20 minutes, going upwards of hours to speak to an officer for a crime. 20% of the time these calls go unresponded to. So we need to make sure that we also invest in hiring more 911 operatives that are trained and ready to do this job. So that's part of it. There's a structural issue of just baseline accountability for proper staffing and 911 response time for police officers, and that led to a staffing issue. When it comes to the macro program meant for nonviolent intervention, we released that program without a dispatch. We released that program, I believe, poorly and performatively, without the anticipation of what was very likely to happen, which is that those individuals don't feel safe on their job and eventually call for OPD oversight. So it is a very important program for Oakland to incubate, but we need to make sure that we do it in a way that it actually does what it's meant to do. So we need to properly budget and support the macro program so that firefighters aren't bearing the burden, first responders, and so that we have a proper dispatch and people know that they can call this and what the parameters are for when to call. And lastly, when it comes to our youth, and I say this often, the elders and the children are the bookends of our society. When we're feeding our children poison in the schools, we're creating new root causes every day. When I recently discovered that Oakland Unified School District were feeding most of our children extremely processed, harmful food, I made it a dedication of mine to make sure that all children in Oakland can eat healthy, nourishing food to help them grow. Because that's not fair to them, right? So we can't be making new root causes and at the same time trying to tackle the old ones. So when it comes to public safety, there's also an emphasis on our elders, our children, and particularly our children who are now exhibiting very alarming traits of being child killers in the streets of Oakland. So we need to take this seriously from both a public safety and staffing perspective, but also from a way that we talk to and treat our youth in our neighborhoods.
From the inception, the Chief of the Office of Violence Prevention is stated to have equal standing with the Chief of Police. How would your administration make that concept a reality? How will your office support the work of the DVP?
I'd like to respond to your second question regarding the standing of the Department of Violence Prevention as a co-equal with the Oakland Police Department. First, I'll say that when you create a budget in any situation, whether it's a city budget or a nonprofit organization, that your budget is a statement of your values. Your budget is a statement of your priorities. And so the first step in creating standing of that department as a co-equal with the Oakland Police Department is to consistently raise its budget. Right now, I believe the budget is $20 million. I'd like to see that budget increased significantly to $50 million, that we would have an opportunity to create a behavioral health unit, that we would have opportunity to fully implement mobile assistance community responders of Oakland at $15 million, to create a community ambassadors team that's grounded in culturally based healing practices at $3 million as the first step on that. The second step, I think, is that we to take an opportunity to assess the performance of that office given its history so far. I think that the more we understand how that office works, the more we understand how it might differ from a model that it was based on, from the Richmond Office of Neighborhood Safety, that we'd have a much better opportunity to enhance the effectiveness of that work. And so I think the third thing is that we make sure that from a public awareness and visibility place, that we make sure that anytime there's a press conference with the mayor and the police chief, that the chief of the Department of Violence Prevention is also present, weighs in on it, that we make sure as much as possible we let the public know that there are other ways to respond to violence, that we have community groups like APTP and Community Ready Corps and others who have come up with a community-based hotline for mental health services, but that we should make sure that the chief of that department is well-versed in all of the possible tools that we have at our disposal to make sure that prevention and suppression of crime and other public safety issues are at the top of our agenda. And so I think that those are among the things that I would do to increase the standing of the current Department of Violence Prevention.
Hello, I'm Elisa Victory Villanueva, and I'm running to be your next mayor. Under my administration, the department heads will be working together for a holistic system of public safety that is addressing and preventing crime. My administration will have enhanced planning, transparency, and accountability across all city departments to ensure synergy, that we achieve our plans and our goals together in partnership. The Department of Violence Prevention chief, including the chief of police, must be partners on all public safety issues and must have equal access and equal power in doing their jobs. To make that a reality, I will ensure that the chiefs of those departments have equal access to the mayor's seat, to the city administration, to information about our budget, about our county partnerships, about our community partnerships, that they have equal opportunities to speak to our public from our press platforms, but also at our neighborhood council meetings and other public safety educational spaces, that they're consulted around our planning, around our budgeting for public safety, that they're treated as equal stakeholders in achieving a safe city where all are able to thrive, where public safety is a civil right. I want to ensure that we have parity among how we are budgeting, that we're budgeting our values, that we're investing not just in incarceration and in criminal prosecution and enforcement, but that we're again investing in the public before anybody needs to commit a crime or be harmed by one. Vote victory this November, victoryforoakland.com.
The most important thing that we do with the Department of Violence Prevention is to get the voices out of the room who speak for themselves and not the community. Here's one example. When you go to the Black community, in particular in the flatlands of D6 and D7 and in District 3, overwhelmingly when polled, Black people tell you they want more police officers, and they want to use every asset available, including cameras and license plate readers, to help stop the crime and the violent crime right now in Oakland and start to catch criminals who are responsible. And yeah, it seems that the Department of Violence Prevention doesn't reflect that and claim to speak for the Black community, and when that's just absolutely not true. So first, we need to stop that. That's dishonest. And it does a disservice to the community when any one group claims that they have the monopoly or they speak for all of us. It's absolutely not okay when the data actually suggests the opposite. Second is, right now we have an adversarial relationship between the Department of Violence Prevention and OPD. When Department of Violence Prevention members regularly rub shoulder with police abolitionists, there's a conflict of interest there, right? So if we're going to be police abolitionists, then we need to arm ourselves appropriately and take care of our own community. And I don't see that. Matter of fact, I've seen same members of that community upset over my own gun ownership. So the amount of hypocrisy here is startling, and the hubris it would be comical, but it's shameful and sad, because it's us who suffers from our inability to have healthy debate in the Black community and not purity pageants that are dominated by performative altruism. So in an asymmetrical way, the Department of Violence Prevention needs to start doing its job and speaking for the community as a whole, and not as a proxy voice for progressives. Progressives are not the only voices in Oakland. As a matter of fact, they're estimated 1/3 of the votership. So lastly, I'll say that the police chief and OPD needs to also work in better faith with the community to restore things like CI budgets that could be used to early inform people where crimes are committed or who did it. We also need to have mentorship programs brought back with the OGs. A lot of the OGs, when you talk to them, feel that there's no support from OPD. And so why should they go and speak to the youth when you have police officers making $200,000-$300,000 a year? That's their job. So we need to make sure that some of that budget goes to the community and the OGs and people who command respect from the community. And those individuals need to be brought into the Department of Violence Prevention, because they have a very unique role of being able to speak to these youth from the same lived experiences. Thank you.
Answer to question number 2 on the Department of Violence Prevention. A recent report indicated that violent far-right groups have thoroughly infiltrated the police departments throughout the U.S. Undoubtedly, the OPD is no exception, and the chief of police is doing nothing and will do nothing about this. The alternative is what I indicated in my first answer. Organize the neighbors and workers in every community for us to solve our problems ourselves.
This response is in regards to the Department of Violence Prevention. The title for the head of violence prevention was intentionally called Chief of the Office of Violence Prevention. So that you would be on equal standing with the police chief. And as mayor, I will ensure that violence prevention is central to the mission of public safety and community engagement. Also, as mayor, I'll ensure that the DVP will have the resources available across all districts. I am the only candidate who have voted for $18 million in investments into the Department of Violence Prevention. And I will work to double the budget and will make it a priority of my administration to prevent violence, invest in violence interrupters and restorative justice programming in our schools and in our communities. A couple of my opponents are now flip-flopping and also stating that they will double the DVP. But when they had the opportunity to do so, they didn't. We need a strong mayor who can not only think outside of the box, but also to not fall into the status quo, because we know that the current status quo isn't working. Under the current administration as well, they have divested from ceasefire. And I and other council members fought to bring back this vital program that saves so many lives. So under a Tao administration, we will reinvest in ceasefire and expand it. Furthermore, I was an early champion of our mental health response program, also known as MACRO. While my opponents worked behind the scenes to kill the program and only voted for it because the writing was already on the wall, and when it came down to a vote, I continue to be steadfast in my vote to support it, and not just support it, but see that it was successful and successfully stood up, and that the vacancies were actually filled. We are seeing that the work of Macro has been successful, and I will expand this resource citywide and not only have it implemented in certain areas of Oakland. Violence prevention is incredibly critical, and we should be able to serve all neighborhoods in the city of Oakland, especially those who are in most need. Part of violence prevention is being very intentional how we partner with community organization. And I am very intentional about using the word partnership instead of co-sponsorship. If we activate public spaces where we can invest directly into community, that's how we keep ourselves safe. And that is what I want to bring to all Oaklanders. And I have done that through making sure that we invest in Deep East Oakland parks, some of the parks that have been extremely underinvested in. And so I've won $2 million from the state directly for Casa Faranga, Arroyo Viejo, and not just that, but Verdes Park as well too. Because again, when we activate these public spaces and are intentional about programming at the parks, that's how we keep ourselves safe.
Here in Oakland, as in other cities across the country, we have treated public safety as a synonym for police. In fact, police are just one of many tools that could and should be used to keep our communities safe. I am 100% supportive of uplifting our Department of Violence Prevention so that it is on the same par, the same stature as our police department, fully living into the vision of DVP and ensuring that we are bringing the both and solution from prevention to response. What that means is that we have to focus on the budget, staffing, policy making, and organizational structures of each department so that we can elevate and strengthen. As far as budgeting, I am committed to doubling our investment into proven violence prevention and crime deterrence programs. That's part of my 10-point plan for public safety. Also, when it comes to staffing, we have to bring more personnel on board to do the critical work that anticipates and addresses violence before it occurs. To do that, we have to not just bring the budget, but also train the personnel, establishing a curriculum and career pathway for bringing more violence interrupters and violence prevention professionals into the city of Oakland. I, as mayor, will partner with Peralta Community Colleges, Laney and Merritt, to ensure that that occurs. Also, when it comes to policy making and decision making, we have to have a combined effort between the enforcement and prevention end in all of our policies. That requires jointly collaborating and working amongst all stakeholders across the continuum, from prevention through to enforcement. Also, organizational structure is key. If we're not organized in a way that follows what we want to do, then we will be setting ourselves up for failure. So I am fully supportive of and will plan to implement the Public Safety Agency for the city of Oakland. That will be one agency under which DVP, our Department of Violence Prevention, and Police Department report. Acknowledging that there are shared goals of public safety between the two, and that shared goals also require shared leadership, and everyone being unified in the same department structure and goals that are necessary. I am fully committed and look forward to implementing these solutions that ensure that violence prevention is not just nominally on par with policing, but it's right there at the table, guiding and driving our effective response to keeping Oaklanders safe.
What will be your strategy in addressing the 12 equity indicators that received the lowest scores in the department's Equity Indicators report? What would be your strategy for coordinating the resources of city and county departments?
Answer to question number 3 on the Department of Race and Equity. I am not the vote for me and I'll set you free candidate. As we saw in the 1960s in the Civil Rights Movement, And before that, in the labor movement in the 1930s. Only a movement from below can resolve our problems, including inequality and racism. We need a campaign for a $28 an hour minimum wage with full benefits. Strengthen and transform the unions to ensure that they fight for all members and all workers.
We in the city of Oakland have a huge problem when it comes to generating report after report after report, but not making action against the recommendations that are contained in them. From the beginning of my term in office, I was resolved not to allow the 2018 Equity Indicators Report to simply sit on a shelf and collect dust. So I've been working consistently, partnering with council members, with other agencies, the county and beyond, to ensure that we do address our highest disparities, those that receive the lowest scores on the department's Equity Indicators Report. Throughout my term, first by partnering with council members Larry Reed, Lynette McElhaney, and Noel Gallo, all representatives of the East Oakland and West Oakland flatlands. Together, as council members, we brought tens of millions of dollars to addressing the disparities called out in these reports. In education, we brought more city resources to the OK program, an organization that I proudly support as a brother in the 100 Black Men organization, one of the key partners responsible for bringing the mentorship needed to help our young African American men in school make better decisions, avoid the high suspension rates that plague others. I've also led efforts to address the digital divide with over $8 million invested to create Oak Wi-Fi, our free broadband internet that addresses the disparities, the digital divide with our lowest income communities, so that our kids can perform better in school, have access to the tools and resources. Also, we've invested significantly into high-performing after-school programs and a teacher residency program to address the disparity in not having teachers that reflect the community that they serve. With respect to public health disparities, that's something I've been working on my entire professional career as a healthcare innovation professional, serving on the board of the West Oakland Health Council and the Leadership Advisory Committee for the Center for Youth Wellness. During the pandemic, we came together in unprecedented ways between the city, the county, and other partners, and I intend to lean on those examples as we partner to address the physical health disparities like asthma rates, obesity, hypertension, and in addition, the high instances of mental health and substance abuse that plague Black and Brown communities. Now, while we address public safety in an earlier question, I think it's important to note that the high rates of incarceration in the Black community must be addressed through more investments into violence prevention, root cause investments, addressing poverty and racism, restorative justice to help our neighbors pursue alternative paths from violent crime in the criminal justice system. I fully supported our police commission and will continue to do so that they have the strength, the autonomy, and independence needed to ensure officers are accountable when they use excessive force and unconstitutionally biased policing.
I'm Elisa Victory Villanueva, and I'm running to be Oakland's next mayor. Our previous administration had a problem of studying, documenting, and naming problems without taking immediate actions to intervene in them and to redress them. We've already failed to address the 2018 indicators report, 12 of the lowest indicators scoring the lowest possible of a number 1. We're in the areas of education, public health, our built environment, and half of them were in the area of public safety. They received the lowest score because they have the highest racial disparities, with Black people who look like me being at the bottom of almost every one. Asians have the highest disparity for pedestrian safety in their built environments. Racism and inequity and exclusion is the design of our cities, the design of our past policy. This indicators report documents the result of decades of failure, of decades of intentional exclusive policy. I'm running on a redesign, a design of justice, of equity and inclusion, one that centers repairing and healing those communities that are already harmed and centering people that are most vulnerable as we move forward so that it will not continue. As a civil rights attorney, I have the expertise in law and policy to advance racial justice. As an ethnic studies and Black studies scholar, author, and educator, I have deep knowledge and experience in designing for justice and educating others on the importance of racial equity and of racial truth. As next mayor, I will lead on our reparative policies. I will lead on higher investments on residents that have been redlined, residents that have been forgotten, that have been left out, that still do not have equitable access even to city information and to City Hall. I will work to staff and resource our Department of Race and Equity, which already exists and should be leading our city, all of our departments, on how to better redesign and reorient for justice. I will work for that intentional design in partnership with community orgs, with the many coalitions that have already put forth a vision of justice, of new deals for Oakland, of a new design. I am running to be Oakland's next mayor. Vote Victory Villanueva this November. Learn more at victoryforoakland.com.
This response is in regards to the Department of Race and Equity. Oakland does have a Department of Race and Equity to help us make informed decisions through a racial equity lens for every one of our policies. I will continue to ensure this department and racial justice is at the forefront of all decision-making that comes before me as mayor. I will ensure this department is given the resources that it needs. I do believe that currently, as it stands, this important department does not have enough resources. Right now, I'm working to address inequities through a proposal for an enhanced infrastructure financing district, which will provide dedicated funding for East and West Oakland, providing funds for critical investments in Black, Brown businesses, cleaning up air and toxic sites, building much needed affordable housing, and creating safer streets with more access to resources like childcare, job opportunities, libraries, and more. I also stood up against the public school closures impacting mostly Black and Brown and low-income communities, while the current mayor and the East Oakland council members sat on the sidelines. Time and time again, we divest from Black and Brown communities and then act shocked when they experience these identified disparities and are more likely to be arrested, are more likely to be homeless, be in poverty, and live shorter lifespans. I will not sit by and allow that to happen when I am mayor. By finding resources to fund investments in parts of Oakland that have experienced inadequate investment of funds, we can begin to undo the damage of lifetimes of systemic racism. And as someone who grew up in public housing and was lucky to survive domestic violence and homelessness as a young mom, I know that we need to invest in lifting those most in need. By lifting from the bottom and investing in our community directly with a racial equity lens, we can make a difference in these outcomes. As your next mayor, I will fight to improve equity and justice across Oakland, and together we will create a safer and more just Oakland.
On the Department of Race and Equity, addressing the 12 indicators that receive the lowest scores, this is a poverty issue. And here's what I'll say about race and equity. We live in a very oppressive system. And when people can no longer compete financially, they begin to compete for moral superiority. That's much more dangerous. As a matter of fact, the way that humans communicate at our best and where equity is the strongest is when we're doing healthy business and when we're celebrating together, right? We naturally find our roles when we're doing those things. So when it comes to race and equity in Oakland, we're not taking care of our own. We eat our own, right? We don't deter people from selling Big Mama's house. We don't find them money so they don't have to sell Big Mama's house to be able to make a living. We're not protecting our real estate interests. We are not clear on whether we want to do business or not. Are we going for socialism or are we going for capitalism that can benefit Black people? And what I mean by that is the asset. Equity is the asset. And our economy is financialized. So due to the financialization of our economy, it's our lack of asset holding that caused the most harm of equity to the Black community. there's a two-tier society. If you hold an asset right now, especially in the past 12 years with free money and how those assets have been inflated, look at the housing market, you're in a different position than Black people and poor people who have not had the ability to acquire those assets, right? So now we're at a point where it seems to be that equity from the prevailing progressive left is we want things for free, or we want entitlement programs that we're going to source through taxation of the wealthy. How's that going to work? Right? You just going to leave for another market. So I think we need a real pragmatic, realistic solution. And to me, equity comes from land ownership, the tutelage of that land, growing food and having livestock and sustainability on that land. I'll add that we need to make sure that land is owned by us and in our communities, and the only way we're going to acquire is to purchase it. So we can work it together. We can use community land trust. There are all types of opportunities available if we're working together holistically and not giving these opportunities away to those who are amongst us, who are basically poverty pimping us out. This money's there and it doesn't ever seem to be spent on the neighborhoods. So in terms of that department, I don't know much about how they work or how they're funded, but as mayor, I'll make sure that we get people in there who can actually do that job and not just perform. I guess a repeated thing that I'm going to have throughout this video is that we've got to get very serious about our problem and stop the posturing. Thank you.
I'd like to address the question regarding Department of Race and Equity and how we would address those 12 equity indicators that received the lowest scores in our Department of Equity indicators report. I think that work is extremely important. I think that there were several things are required to make equity actionable in city government. We know that the earliest equity efforts in public systems was in Seattle, then in Portland, and now here in Oakland. I believe that to make equity actionable, we have to make sure that it is a system-wide, all of government effort, that we make sure that number one, we expose and train all city staff to what it means to work in equitable ways, both externally and internally. Number two, I believe that we need to use a racial equity lens for all major decisions in city government, and that requires us to understand what that lens looks like. For almost a 15-year period, I worked as a trainer with the Association of Black Foundation Executives, working all over the country to make sure that philanthropy and their partners in cities around the United States actually were able to make equity meaningful in their cities. In Buffalo, New York, for example, I was part of a team that ultimately trained more than 2,000 people in city government, in nonprofits, in the faith community to understand what equity meant in making big decisions around human resources, around development, around economic opportunity writ large. So I believe that those 12 indicators can be they have been identified. I think we need to work very hard to make sure that equity principles are part of the sort of the DNA of city government, and that ultimately we work our Department of Equity out of a job, that those principles, those practices, those ways of acting on equity actually would be part of our daily lives, part of our daily program, and so that we wouldn't have a need for a separate department, but rather those principles would be fully implemented inside all of city government.
It is no secret that individuals and families are struggling to keep or secure housing in Oakland. The housing crunch is negatively impacting all facets of our lives. How would you address challenges related to housing while maintaining the ethnic and economic diversity which make Oakland so desirable?
Gentrification is the global consolidation of wealth. It's a global phenomenon. It's accelerated in the past decade plus with free money for the financial elites. And we're in a conundrum now where over half of the mortgage-backed securities are owned by private equity. So we're in danger of even further levels of gentrification, which includes allowing massive amounts of crime and homelessness in our predominantly Black communities, bringing down our property value only when things have hit rock bottom and all the people have lost their property and assets due to the divestment in our communities. Then you have big money and institutional money able to come back and swoop up those assets. So it looks like as much as we fight against gentrification, we're doing it to ourselves right now through the performative policies that are exhibited through in Oakland with the progressives. So here's how we end gentrification. We need to actually own things. We need to support businesses of poor people, and that means that the funds need to stop being wasted in Oakland building department, underbidding. If you look at the recent homeless audit report, we are overpaying contractors significantly while the homeless population gets worse. And I bring these things up because these are millions of dollars we could be using to help incubate Black businesses in our neighborhood. But no one's going to be able to do business and make money and solve gentrification and bring more economic prosperity to the Black community if we don't have base level public safety. And that's the big issue right now, is that you can't keep a business open without getting robbed, especially if you want to open a business. People of color who have businesses in our communities are facing some of the most intense robberies and property crime, and then we're going to ignore it by our city government. So if we want to create a city that's livable and workable, which is a big deal, especially with the continued disenfranchisement of the flatlands, we're going to have to really be serious about public safety so that we can create business-friendly communities.
This response is in regards to the gentrification question. Gentrification is a major issue across the nation, and here specifically in the East Bay, we are seeing that families that have lived in Oakland for generations are now being displaced due to lack of opportunities for home ownership or the high rent costs. The solutions to combat gentrification must be regional, including enforcing that every city who are anchoring large businesses or corporations are also implementing a new housing stock for its workforce, so that its workforce are not displacing current residents or other neighboring cities' residents as well. Moreover, under the current administration, the city of Oakland have not built nearly enough deeply affordable and moderate rate housing, but they have built 130% of market rate housing. So the question becomes, who are we building for and who will be able to continue to live here in Oakland? I am the champion of the feasibility study around creating an enhanced infrastructure financing district, which is not a new tax, but is similar and better than redevelopment because it'll have strong oversight. This is an incentive for developers to build for deeply affordable and moderate rate and workforce housing as well, creating an avenue for current residents to continue to reside here in Oakland. Moreover, it is equally important to ensure that the city supports the first-time home buyer program, specifically for Oakland's Black, Brown, and working families to become homeowners. Creating intentional opportunities for intergenerational wealth is incredibly important to me, as we know this will allow for positive intergenerational health outcomes, success, and so much more.
Answer to question number 4 on gentrification. I call for a crash program of public housing at rents that are affordable to all. The number one threat as far as accelerating gentrification is the Howard Terminal project. Despite the fact that it is the most important economic development project in Oakland at this time, it is largely overlooked in this race. I am the only candidate who opposes it in principle. This project will vastly accelerate gentrification, jack up rents, and bring gentrifier and privatizer John Fisher right into the heart of Oakland politics, while it will also be a major step to destroying an important source of good jobs, the Port of Oakland. Community benefits doesn't change that at all.
I'd like to respond to your question regarding gentrification. As the mayor of Oakland, I would help craft a comprehensive policy for increasing housing production with a heavy emphasis on affordability, preserving existing affordable housing, and protecting Oakland residents from housing instability and displacement. One of the beauties of our city is, in fact, our racial and ethnic diversity. People come to Oakland because of the culture, because of the heart of the city, the soul of the city, and housing affordability and the issues of the unhoused are extremely important. So first, we need to protect Oakland's 47%. 209,000 of our residents are rent burdened from housing instability and displacement. So we need to maintain and strengthen our just cause framework. We need to reinstate the Oakland Mortgage Assistance Program. We need to maintain and protect the Oakland Rent Adjustment City Ordinance's 3% cap. We need to create an Oakland Emergency Assistance Network by combining Oakland Housing Authority's rent assistance program with a legal assistance program for tenants and spend $3 million in fiscal year 23-25 on that. We need to strengthen Oakland's permanent access to housing, or the PATH framework equity components, to improve implementation and management. Second, we need to produce 20,000 market rate and 20,000 affordable and very affordable homes by 2018. And that means working with the departments of housing and community development to partner with Alameda County's Community Development Agency, as well as the Bay Area Regional Housing Fund, to provide down payment assistance, housing preservation, and development resources of $500 million over a 5-year period. We need to direct our Housing and Economic Development Department to unlock and publicize all vacant, underutilized city land and prioritize it. And then lastly, we need to keep Oakland housed by protecting 20,000 affordable and low-income homes from displacement. And one of the tools that we would use to do that is to create an open access digital rental registry that updates every 24 hours and shows how many units are owned, how much is charged, and how many are vacant. It's in those ways, among others, that we make sure that African Americans, that Latinx folks, that people of color, vulnerable folks who are renters can begin to move from secure rental housing to home ownership.
As a third generation Oaklander, the issue of gentrification hits particularly close to home for me. More than 2/3 of my family members who I lived with growing up are no longer living in Oakland because they've been displaced into other cities, or in some cases into homelessness. So we have to acknowledge that the high cost of living skyrocketing over the past 20 years has far outpaced the average household incomes. And that has left a lot of people without the ability to maintain a foothold here in Oakland, the town that they're from and the town that they love. We as city government have to partner with the county, state, and federal partners, as well as others, to ensure that we can keep the cost of housing from rising, provide more affordable options, while also increasing the earning potential of our residents through our economic and workforce development programs and investments. And third, we also have to acknowledge that some of the displacement that we see is elective, that sometimes residents look and see that the cost that they're paying for housing, property taxes, and other, it doesn't compute when they look at the high crime rates, when they look at the blight, the disrepair of our roadways and infrastructure, and when they look at the poor performing schools. So we have to change the value proposition as well, in addition to maintaining the cultural connectivity of our residents to this amazing place. Because when they see themselves reflected in the cultural programming, the art, the community organizations, they end up sticking and seeing the greater value in maintaining a presence. So yes, as Oakland's next mayor, I will continue the same efforts I have conducted as council member, addressing prevention, keeping folks from becoming unhoused by supporting low-income renters and homeowners from displacement, bringing emergency rental relief, mortgage assistance, legal services, and holding landlords accountable for egregious acts against tenants. Also supporting efforts to establish emerging developers so that they can be a part of the development programs, building jobs. They will then in turn hire those who are more reflective of the community. We also have to adjust our financing mechanisms for affordable housing. I propose that we create an affordable housing social impact investing fund, that we look at our impact fees and ensure that We refine them so that we reduce fees on affordable housing projects. We allow faster allocation of affordable housing trust fund dollars. And we increase the production of on-site affordable housing to derive maximum immediate relief for those who are subject to the housing crisis. We also have to focus on home ownership just as much, low-income home ownership just as much as we focus on low-income renters. Because we know that when our residents have a foothold here, they build equity for themselves as opposed to investing in equity of corporate investors and real estate owners. So just as I've worked with Black affordable housing developers and others to create a pipeline of more than 800 units of housing here in Oakland District 6, I will continue to do the same thing as mayor, building more equitable economic development and housing development so that Oaklanders can maintain a foothold right here in the city that they're from, that they love, and that they want to stay a part of.
I'm Elisa Victory Villanueva, and I'm running to be the next mayor of Oakland. I am from this community and have overcome homelessness as a teen with my entire family in the city of Oakland. To address our housing crisis and our housing affordability crisis, we must also address our racial equity issues, as a majority of our homeless population right now are Black, but our city is only 20% Black. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens by intentional push out, by intentional housing policies that have been unjust and unequal. I want to serve and address our housing crisis with tenant encampments by not managing them, but by expanding our shelter bed capacity and pathways to dignified housing. I want to invest the millions of dollars that our city has received in emergency assistance and grant funding to be used to solve our crisis, not to manage it, not to pay administrators, and certainly not to have it untraceable and untracked, as our city administrator confirmed in our most recent homeless audit report. A majority of the housing that our city has permitted and allowed to be built during this past administration has been market rate and luxury. We barely even met 50% of our affordable housing building goals. I will ensure that we are prioritizing permitting and building of housing units that are affordable to Oakland's residents and workers. I will add new funding mechanisms for building, including through a public banking system, which I helped to advise our city and the city of San Francisco back in 2014 on. I've been working diligently on ensuring that we are still studying and making sure that this is a reality. Having public banking will allow for more public financing and public control of a critical public need, which is housing. I will also ensure that we are implementing our existing funding streams to build housing and to provide housing services, including through our vacant parcel tax and our affordable housing impact fees. I will expand the types of housing that we are building and bringing to this city, including workforce housing, social housing, and mixed income housing. Above all, I will lead through our human rights crisis with a human rights lens, not criminalizing poverty, not exacerbating the problem, but leading with love and leading with an open heart, knowing that I've been in the same place that many of our residents have, who are sleeping in cars, who are sleeping in parks, and sleeping in tent encampments. Our community is resilient, is thriving, and is fighting to stay here. And they need a mayor that is going to help allow more people to stay in Oakland, to stay rooted here, and to stay housed here. I'm Elisa Victory Villanueva, running for Oakland Mayor. Vote Victory Villanueva this November. Visit victoryforoakland.com for more information.
The large number of unhoused people in Oakland can often be traced to the intersection of numerous failures by government services on many levels. As mayor, what would be your strategy for addressing this challenge? Since African Americans are significantly overrepresented in the unhoused population, how would your plan specifically address that issue?
With more than 5,000 residents of Oakland estimated to be unhoused on our streets or couch surfing, we are beyond the point of crisis and must respond with the urgency that this emergency warrants. There are so many factors that have contributed to the rise in homelessness that we will need a multitude of responses and solutions to get us out of this mess. We can no longer afford to hold anything back as we respond and support our residents. At the same time, we must recognize that this is not a problem we can solve on our own. We must partner across cities, with our county, state, and federal partners, with local corporations and philanthropy, nonprofits as well. As chair of Oakland's Life Enrichment Committee, under which homelessness falls, and also as a representative to the Association of Bay Area Governments, I have engaged with our regional partners and internal city partners to establish frameworks for working together and addressing the continuum of homeless response, from prevention to immediate crisis response, supporting those who are unhoused and on streets, to the transitional housing and long-term sustained housing solutions that must be put in place. We have to recognize that the homeless population is not a monolith. There are many different factors as to how each person arrived in the state of homelessness, and there are a multitude of solutions that will help them navigate towards being permanently housed. We have to be able to support each one individually, and so I will continue to be focused, as I have as a council member, not just on building more housing, taking advantage of city-owned land and other parcels, but also providing more and more effective services, outreach to our unhoused, workforce development to help uplift their skills so that they can earn more and be able to afford housing, or at least to supplement what we're subsidizing. Mental health services, acknowledging the significant prevalence of mental health in the unhoused community, and how with being unchecked and unresolved, mental health continues to keep people from maintaining stable housing. I will also lead on strengthening eviction protections for renters and homeowners to support low-income homeowners from displacement as well as the renters. And yes, we also have to advocate for more resources from these other partners, because we don't have enough in our general fund to solve the need, the magnitude that exists here in our streets. We've got to double our investment into these homeless services that I was describing earlier. We've got to be able to implement an accountability system for our partners who are providing homeless services to ensure that they are delivering the outcomes that we want and not just collecting a check and having interactions that don't lead to actually transitioning our residents out of homelessness into stable housing. I firmly believe and advocate for an Oakland First policy whereby services, investments, housing opportunities, and other resources are allocated to longtime Oaklanders first, prioritizing those who've been here more than 7 years above those who just moved here yesterday. We've got to look out for our own, and that's important to me. As someone with deep roots who have seen folks displaced, folks who have been here for a long time, Oakland needs to support and protect them. And yes, all of this has to be done with a focus on uplifting, empowering, and supporting folks to be self-sufficient and move towards stable housing. And I will continue that focus in partnership with community, as I have as a council member here in Oakland over the past several years.
The Unhoused. Prior to 2019, the average homeless person in Oakland, 80%, were Black, and they went homeless in the neighborhoods they grew up in. That's not the case anymore. Now, if you look around, what do you see a lot of times? Yes, you see Black people, but you also see a lot of white people, particularly white male drug transients who've come to Oakland because we're the promised land of milk and fentanyl. So our homeless population, in fact, has grown 24% in the last 2 years, despite an eviction moratorium. Let that sink in. We have an eviction moratorium meant to prevent just that, and yet our homeless grows 1/4, 24%, adding thousands more to our streets who are unsheltered. These aren't Black people anymore who grew up in Oakland. These are largely white people who are coming here, and they're stealing our catalytic converters, and they're dumping in our streets, and they're pulling their RVs up, and they're doing anything they want, and we're protecting that while they destroy Black communities. It's absolutely insidious. It's disgusting that we allow this behavior, and we protect drug transients who are white males who come to Black neighborhoods. I'm going to say that over and over again. I live in West Oakland. I see Wood Street. Everyone around here sees white males, half naked, jerking off, doing everything under the sun in our black neighborhoods. And then you have our activists who defend them. It's disgusting. So we're going to put an end to that. We have a homeless encampment policy that provides a list of do's and don'ts for public camping. It was passed unanimously by City Council. Every single member of City Council voted for that policy, and yet they've gaslit us and they've allowed these rules to be broken. You are not supposed to have any encampment 50 feet from schools, businesses, residents, critical infrastructure, or parks. That's high sensitive unless you're attached to a nonprofit for oversight. Also, every single district in Oakland is supposed to have a city-sanctioned encampment. Nearly 2 years now, most of them haven't done it yet. So those promises have been broken as usual, but we have a framework for how to address public camping. And in the low sensitive areas where you're allowed to publicly camp, we're not going to allow pervasive crime, open air drug market, or flammable, combustible RV meth labs, right? We're going to put it into that. It's just absolutely not okay to allow this in the streets of Oakland. So the issue is triage. When 70% of your unhoused have different levels of acuity of drug addiction and mental illness, they need shelter first with wraparound services, not housing. When it comes to the 30% who are often forgotten, who are just poor, regular people, they need housing first. We'll stop the slogans, we'll stop the posturing, and actually do the work to get people the help that they need, not the help that they want. Thank you.
I'm Elisa Victory Villanueva, and I'm running to be Oakland's next mayor. Our city has responded to our declared local emergency back in 2018 with a plan and policy of encampment management, which is doing just that. It's managing our 10 encampments. Our homeless population has grown under this policy. We've seen millions of dollars that have been spent without a single person housed and without the money being accountable for, as confirmed by our city auditor. As mayor and someone who's been homeless in this city, I will lead with a human rights lens, with housing first policy, prioritizing all of our staffing and resources and dollars to housing people, to solving our crisis, not managing it. We have to get out of this emergency level of crisis by expanding our shelter bed capacity, by expanding our temporary pathways back into housing and having dignified housing options. We need to open up our public lands and use them for public good. We need to use our housing dollars to actually fund housing solutions and have financial transparency and accountability to our spending. We need to enforce our existing revenue streams to maximize the amount of resources that we have available. As mayor, I have the political will to set a goal of ending this homelessness crisis, not managing it, not reducing it, not maintaining it, and certainly not allowing it to grow. I will continue to be in partnership with those who are directly impacted, with homeless advocates that spend every day on the ground talking with these community members. I will partner with our county to ensure that their homeless fund and resources are reaching Oakland, which has the largest percentage of unhoused people out of all the cities in the county. The acute racial disparity of our homeless population being majority Black when we are only 20% Black is due to decades and generations of anti-Black housing policy. So we must intentionally redesign our city for equity and for justice. Homeless services, resources, outreach must prioritize Black Oaklanders and ensure delivery of services is made in a culturally competent way, and that is in partnership with organizations and individuals that are already trusted in these communities. I'm Elisa Victory Villanueva, running to be the next mayor of Oakland. Vote Victory this November. Visit victoryforoakland.com for more information.
I'd like to respond to your question regarding the unhoused. This issue is probably the most important issue, second only maybe to public safety, that Oakland voters and Oakland residents are concerned with. The right to housing is a human right. It is immoral, unconscionable, fully unacceptable to have as many of our neighbors living under the bridges, in encampments, in shelter that is not fit for human beings. I believe that all of us as a city who make up the city is responsible for dealing with and correcting the issues that are there. We know that on any given night, there are 7,000 unhoused people in Alameda County. About 5,000 of those live in Oakland. About 70% of those are African Americans, and a significant number of those folks are seniors. And so it is an urgent crisis. We know that every time the city has to deal with an encampment in a policy that has fundamentally not served us, we suffer. And that people, real people like my friend Rendell, Raven, people who I've met along the way who are unhoused are dealing with creating a home. So I think the first thing that we do is we stop homelessness before it starts with prevention services. When asked, people who are unhoused will say that as a body, as a collective, 67% of the problem is financial, that people didn't have one more month of rent. And so they lost their home, or their car broke down and they didn't have money to pay for it to get to work. And now they live in their car. Universal basic income and an expansion of that program will go a long way on the prevention side to make sure that people have some fundamental needs that are met while they still have housing. Number two, we need to focus on the extremely low income folks and provide housing and supports to those most vulnerable families, seniors, people with disabilities, and other people surviving on fixed income, that those first folks are to be the first ones to find homes within the city and the county's programs. Number three, we need to provide access to those services and protect people from experiencing homelessness with shelter, mental health care, hygiene services, safe parking, jobs programs, and violence prevention. I think it's in this way that we humanize the problem, that we begin to think about better solutions. When I was in visiting with some of the folks out at Wood Street encampment, an encampment that housed 200 people up until recently, and now that the city and the Department of Transportation for the state of California are now moving people out of those homes, we see that tiny homes were destroyed when they need to be. The people were made to move often without a new home to go to. And what people said to me that stuck out the most was that often we don't ask people who are most impacted by a problem what they think. Unhoused folks, they're advocates, people who live in these situations understand what they need the most. We need to start listening to them, paying attention, and crafting solutions based on them. As a lot of our friends in the social justice movement will remind us, nothing for us without us. And that same idea is true when it comes to the unhoused.
This response is in regards to the unhoused. We know that Oakland is in multiple different crises, and one of them is our unhoused community. Due to a lack of leadership from the executive branch to fund and build deeply affordable and moderate rate housing, we are seeing that our affordability housing crisis is landing many families on our streets, specifically our African American families and individuals. We saw recently from the city's audit that the mayor and her executive team have not adequately accounted for the $70 million of funds that have gone out to organizations that they have contracted with to help get our unhoused off the streets. This is a huge failure of leadership. As your next mayor, I will work to ensure that every single dollar that we have to address this problem is accounted for and ensure that we have a system of measurement in place to hold our city accountable for what is working and what is not working. We must do better, and the organizations that my administration will partner with will meet with my team bi-weekly to ensure that we are being effective and transparent on how we are using the resources we have to address this problem. While we work to invest in adding more affordable housing, we need to have a stronger plan in place to help those experiencing this crisis right now. Homelessness is not a new problem. The problem definitely has exploded for various reasons. We know that there are organizations that have done this work and have been effective for decades, including those who have housed refugees. As mayor, I want to ensure that those organizations that are receiving the funding are reporting back to my office biweekly on what is working and what isn't working, including having strong metric system for collecting the data of success and failures. Additionally, we must invest in ensuring that our Oakland families who are housing insecure are given the resources and support before they are displaced, because we know that that's how we save money. We must work to keep our affordable housing stock and increase it through land trusts and work through with the county and state to develop more housing. The city of Oakland cannot and should not have to bear the responsibility of so many other cities' unhoused communities. We must have a regional approach to homelessness that includes all cities, including the county and the state, participating in and investing in solutions. With the relationships I've developed with my colleagues on the city council, at the county level, and state officials, I will work to add more affordable housing options while providing the services we offer to address housing insecurity and improve delivery of services to the unhoused.
Answer to question number 5, the unhoused. Housing for profit has failed us miserably, just as has healthcare for profit. We need to build a campaign to demand funds for a crash program for publicly owned housing for all. That campaign should also demand a $28 an hour minimum wage.
One could say it is a tale of two Oaklands. Studies have documented that those who live in the hills have a life expectancy 15 years greater than those who live in the flatlands. Briefly outline how you see the history of this problem and what are some of the steps you would take to reverse the trend that disproportionately impacts Black and brown people in our city.
I want to respond to your question and concern about the history of the problems that have created different life expectancies in Oakland residents, depending on where you live. Where you live matters. And we know that starting in the beginnings of this country, that white supremacy, structural racism, and all of the attendant problems and challenges have a historical and a contemporary manifestation. We know that the most recent examples in our modern history have been due to redlining, this practice of investing in white communities, typically the suburbs, and disinvesting or failing to invest in communities of color. Starting in the 1930s, the U.S. government underwrote $120 billion of mortgage lending, and the assessments that underwriters did nationally that became part of that system were fundamentally racist. They determined that if African Americans or Latinos or even Jews lived in a particular neighborhood, that those neighborhoods were going to lose value, and it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you take a redlining map from the 1930s in Oakland and you overlay it onto a map of what currently exists in Oakland, you'll see very stark similarities. And so I think the way that we begin to shift this is that policies created the problem and policies can begin to ameliorate the problem. It is essentially a function of reparations. It's a function of public land policy that gives privilege and preference to people of color who have been moved out of an area, if it was in this generation or the last generation. In Portland, Oregon, for example, there's a program that looks at preferential treatment to family members of people who have been displaced, families themselves who have been displaced. And so in the Oakland example, we would be asking people in Antioch, Pittsburgh, Stockton, places where African Americans and others have gone because they can't afford to live in Oakland, what can we do to bring those folks back? So I think the fundamental premise is that when a bad public policy creates disparate outcomes, that it's good public policy that begins to put us in a much better position. I think that the disparities between the hills and the flatlands are clear, and that until we actually employ equity issues and equity practice in our housing decisions, in our policing decisions, in our where we fill potholes, those are going to continue to be problems that we grapple with over the next generation or two. But I believe that we can do something about it on our watch.
This response is in regards to the environment. We know that redlining has caused so much harm, including eminent domain, to create the 980 interchange, which took away so many Black families' intergenerational wealth. Furthermore, we also see policies that are rooted in systemic racism. such as allowing big trucks on 80 and not allowing big trucks on 580. As Council President Pro Tem, I have represented Oakland at the Alameda County Transportation Commission and have been able to fight for the state and port to implement mechanisms to take older, dirtier trucks off of our freeways and replace them with clean energy fuel trucks. This will directly create more positive outcomes for our Black, Brown, and lower income communities. More so, I have fought for and want investments in increasing the tree canopy for East Oakland, Deep East Oakland, and West Oakland. When we move forward with new infrastructure in these areas specifically, we must make it a policy to leverage resources to mitigate pollution. We also need to recognize that commuters and vehicles heading to and from San Francisco are a huge contributor to air quality problems. We need a dedicated bus lane on the Bay Bridge to bring cleaner, greener, and faster Transbay services to the Bay Bridge, and to ensure we don't bring more cars when Treasure Island is finally developed. I also believe we need to recognize the harm that the freeways can have on communities around them. We need to work to ensure that we address environmental racism in our air quality and transportation systems. The Bay Area Air Quality Management District is working to improve air quality in West Oakland, and the port is a huge contributor to these very poor outcomes. I have been following the zero emissions goals for the Port of Oakland and have seen some of the work firsthand. I believe the port can move rapidly on bringing clean energy for all on-site infrastructure, and they have been moving to ensure that happens. The areas that are most in need of changes are the use of diesel trucks, which are often idling, and the actual ships that come to the port, which rely on heavily polluting fuel. Diesel vehicles are the #1 contributor to smog emissions in California, and we need to electrify them swiftly. Replacing thousands of shipping vehicles with zero waste vehicles will also be extremely challenging and critical for reducing emissions and pollutions at and near all of California's port. The port cannot hit its zero emissions goals without a lot of support, oversight, and accountability. And as your next mayor, I will work with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, port, the state, and all stakeholders to improve our air quality and fight for a cleaner Oakland. Finally, we need a candidate who will stand up to coal and the big polluters, and that means a candidate who doesn't take their donations. I am the council member in this race to not take money from coal interests or big polluters, and that is public information. Thank you.
It is ridiculous that in some parts of our city, you have a 15-year lower life expectancy than in other parts of our city simply by the zip code that you live in. That is unacceptable. And we have to acknowledge that the issues of these environmental and health disparities that plague certain parts of our city comes down to racism, institutionalized racism, redlining, disinvestment that's occurred over time. We have significantly neglected, underserved communities, leading to higher incidences of toxic substances entering the ground, air, and water that these low-income, predominantly Black and Latino communities are exposed to. And in addition, we must acknowledge that we don't have access to basic amenities that most neighborhoods and communities take for granted, the things that lead to healthier outcomes, like healthy and affordable access to food and produce, also convenient access to parks and open spaces for exercise, health promotion, and recreation. These conditions manifest themselves through higher asthma rates, cancer rates, increased toxic stress, mental health issues, and so much more. As council member, I have promoted healthier lifestyles by activating parks across District 6. We've secured more than $6 million to invest in local East Oakland parks, starting a healthy food access program with the Saba Grocers Initiative to bring healthy produce to corner stores throughout East Oakland Flatlands and also other underserved communities across Oakland. I've also addressed significant disparities in COVID outcomes by working with county, state partners, bringing food access, testing, vaccination prop-ups, other resources. An incredible partner that I have enjoyed working with is Umoja Health out of UCSF. They have brought the intentional focus on addressing disparities, first with COVID, but expanding to make sure that we are engaging communities for other disparities that exist. And in addition, we also have to focus on the built environment that causes or can reduce the environmental justice disparities. And so one of the things that I focused on is increasing the urban canopy, adding trees to the flatlands of East Oakland in a way that we reduce the overall carbon footprint. We're able to make things more peaceful, calm with the tree-lined streets that we know and are proven to improve safety as well as overall stress and mental health. As mayor, I will continue engaging with community and community partners to amplify my impact on the health and environmental aspects of our community so that all of our residents enjoy a long, productive life and we don't have a significant disparity in life expectancy or other health outcomes when it comes from one part of our city to the other. I look forward to partnering with you in that as we move forward.
Answer to question number 6, the environment. As the question implies, health and life expectancy are directly related to the environment. There are no local solutions. Here's one example. As seas rise due to global warming, all the pollution in the soil in West Oakland will be pushed to the surface, making that part of Oakland even more unhealthy. That is an example of why my campaign is about building a working class movement to stop global warming. To be blunt, we need a working class party and we need socialism.
Hello, I'm Elisa Victory Villanueva, and I'm running to be Oakland's next mayor. The history of our current climate and environmentally toxic problem is environmental racism that has been built in through our past policies and practices. We've allowed polluting companies to operate right next to schools, right next to homes. We built freeways straight through neighborhoods, taking away housing and making those that continue to live there at risk of all types of health issues, including higher rates of asthma. I've lived in all 7 of our city districts and personally experienced the disparate environmental health, the massive toxicity that exists in Chinatown and downtown, as well as in Deep East Oakland. I know that there is disparity among each districts, there's disparity in services and in health outcomes, but our environment does not care about boundaries. Our environment is essential to all of us thriving and being able to live in this city. Even our hills experience toxicity and have unique climate threats, including fire hazards. We must act collectively to meet the crisis threatening all of us and the environment and resources that we depend on. As mayor, I will exceed our 2030 Equitable Climate Action Plan with the Red, Black, and Green New Deal that is focused on greening our city operations, building green jobs, but addressing our long-standing equity and disparity issues. I will partner with our Indigenous communities for land rematriation and Indigenous stewardship. I will work to redress health harms to our Flatland residents, to Chinatown residents in West Oakland, and prioritize their needs because they have long been harmed and they already are dealing with lower life expectancy, higher health issues. This includes reversal of those harms with rezoning, enforcing hazard and toxic industries away from our homes, our residential areas, from our schools, negotiating adequate community benefits for all development, especially those on public lands, to ensure that we're mitigating negative climate impacts. I also want to ensure that we're building for a climate resilient future, that as we go forward, we build in a model of climate justice, of climate equity into all that we're doing going forward. I'm proudly not accepting any money from the coal industry or other fossil fuel industries in this race. I am running to make sure that our city is healthy and that all Oaklanders can thrive. Vote victory this November. Visit victoryforoakland.com for more information.
Environmental racism. Again, I live in West Oakland. I'm a community farmer. I run bottoms-up community garden. And so on a daily basis, we're reminded as we struggle to grow food here, despite the high toxicity of our environment, we've had to bring in feet of wood chips to plant before we put soil down because our soil is so toxic. We have to regularly test our trees and edible foliage before we eat them to make sure that they're healthy for us to consume. So it's very important that we put a stop to this. The Port of Oakland is a very valuable resource. So as trucks go in and out of that port, we need to be mindful of those emissions and really cutting down on the usage of high emission vehicles as soon as possible as we bring them close to our neighborhood. Another thing is the illegal dumping. Illegal dumping and burnt out vehicles. 1 gallon of motor oil in our water poisons 10,000 gallons of water. So when you're looking at contributing to long-standing patterns of environmental racism, we're not doing ourselves any favors by allowing upwards of 70% of Oakland's homeless encampments in just one district, District 3, and over 90% of Oakland's homeless encampments in the flatland. And those encampments are often dumped on illegally because we have a laissez-faire approach to how we manage them, and that also ends up contributing to the historic the history of economic racism, environmental racism in our neighborhood. And lastly, we need to grow food. Growing food reverses that trend. I have a plan called Overgrow Oakland, which is a Department of Agriculture where we can grow food in tax-abated land and blighted properties and median food and plant medicine to make our city both walkable, edible, and forageable. And we're going to add a digital walkable foraging map so people can engage interactively with their community, their neighborhood community garden, and their edible landscape to increase not only their own health, but their knowledge of their neighbors and their immediate community. So that's the other ways to approach this environmental racism. And not just that, but what's coming in terms of globally, Oakland's climate is going to make us a highly sought after destination as you have increasing numbers of climate refugees. So we need to get our head up on that and create our own communities that are sustainable, resilient, and prepared for what's to come.
The city of Oakland and our residents have been the subject of endless case studies and pilot projects. However, many feel like they do not see their input reflected in our city's policies and practices. How would your administration address this problem?
Answer to question number 7, community engagement. I am the only candidate that comes from the movement itself. I have been centrally involved in various union struggles, in Occupy Oakland, and Black Lives Matter type protests. My campaign is all about helping to build and unite such a movement.
Community engagement. My nonprofit is called Neighbors Together Oakland, and we were formed to increase the resilience and preparedness in our neighborhood. And we operate on 4 pillars: community safety, soil-based economies and localized agriculture systems, accessible housing, and thriving local businesses. But most important, we need to create a third place where people can go in their communities and be welcome, safe, and able to talk to their neighbors about the things that they want. We have a structure with our NPCs and community resource officers that I believe is underutilized in Oakland. It could be a really good way to increase the knowledge of our neighborhoods, but it's going to start local. I have a philosophy of planting your feet and letting your roots grow, which takes time. It takes the time to get to know your neighbors and not judge them. It takes the time to try to get to work with other people who have different lived experiences to create communities that are sustainable, safe, and equitable for everyone, especially as we have a balance of traditional Oaklanders who've been here for generations, proudly, and an influx of people in the past decade, like myself, who have moved to the city because of its many gifts and offerings, and have thrown ourselves here out of love and dedication to create an Oakland that's better for everyone. So we have to communicate as neighbors. We have to unite the hills and the flats finally, right? I think the hills are ready to admit that there's a restoration of justice owed to the flatland, especially as more people from the flat have been able to increase their own economic prosperity and move above the 580. So as an administrator, how would I address this is, I'm Oakland's neighbor is my brand. I'm not a politician. I'm just a neighbor who felt that we're not being listened to. I'm running because the voices of neighbors and local businesses are largely ignored in favor of special interests like our public sector labor unions and commercial real estate or larger business interests. And it's about local businesses and the neighbors first, right? These positions, city council and mayor, are the lowest level political offices we have. They should exist only to serve, or primarily to serve the interests of the neighbors and local businesses. And right now they don't. So that's why I'm running for mayor of Oakland, is to do exactly that, to increase the level of community engagement and the accessibility and accountability in that office. So if you elect me, every Friday, starting at noon, I will come out to Frankogawa Plaza and on the steps of City Hall and stay there with a press conference until the last question is answered, no matter how long that takes. So, thank you.
Hello, I'm Elisa Victory Villanueva, and I'm running to be Oakland's next mayor. I have been one of the members of this community attending endless town halls, listening sessions, public input, city council meetings, task force, commissions, committee meetings, and I see that we have a lack of political will. I've conducted many of these sessions and community surveying myself on behalf of our city and our county. I have the benefit of having been directly involved in so many community engagement and community benefits processes, but see that after they conclude, our city fails to be consistent in asking for what our community has crafted, to keeping the community input centered in decision making, to even remembering what input was been provided and transitioning that and incorporating it into every new leadership, new budget, and new day that we have to act as a city. I will improve our community engagement with participatory budgeting, meaning I want the public to have more of a direct input, direct decision making in how I will craft and propose my budget to the council. Our budget is a statement of our values, and it must reflect Oakland's needs and the values of our workers and our residents. I will host accessible office hours located in the community. You don't have to come find me at City Hall. I will come to you. I will be accessible to you. I will be present and visible in all 7 of our city districts. I will also have expanded language access so that people who speak other languages, people who even have hearing and speech impediments are able to participate, are able to activate around what our city is doing and understand our civic engagement and city laws. I will be a mayor who listens to my administration, who listens to the people of the city, who listens and partners with council, who listens to you all as consultants and experts in the issues you are experiencing every day on the ground. I will listen to the advice and recommendations of our boards, our commissions, our city staff who are diligently working to provide us with analysis, with audits, and with recommendations for improved services. Some of my initial actions as mayor will be implementing the various recommendations, policies, and even legislation that already exists but is suffering from a lack of political will in our current administration. I will implement recommendations from our city auditor, including increased transparency and accountability of our homeless service dollars. I'm clear on what our problems are and will act to intervene and to resolve them. I will lead with an administration that is accountable, that is transparent, and that is accessible, and that will enhance our community engagement, our civic engagement, and our democracy overall in the city of Oakland. Vote victory this November. Learn more at victoryforoakland.com.
In response to your question about community engagement, I'd like to offer the following response. Often people don't see themselves reflected in our city policies and practices because too often we don't really ask. Yes, there have been a lot of studies and surveys and listening sessions over the years on a range of issues, but often we don't take the time to listen more deeply to what a cross-section of Oaklanders have to say. So I think the first thing we do is we have to learn how to listen more deeply, that we facilitate and convene conversations on a regular basis where Oaklanders get to have their say. Second, I think we need to make sure that people know that we heard them, that we document those ideas, but that we lift up the best thinking that represents a common ground. that we lift up the best and most innovative ideas to deal with public safety, to deal with housing, to deal with quality of life issues, from illegal dumping to potholes and to all the other things that we know are of concern to Oakland residents. And then lastly, once we've listened deeply, once we lift up the best of that thinking, then we lead implementation with a laser-like focus, that we make sure that we actually execute on those ideas, that we make sure that people see that their ideas are reflected, and that we do the work. One example I'll give you is that along the way, we've encountered people who are pothole vigilantes. And interestingly, these are folks who in the middle of the night will take a bag of asphalt and a shovel and some gravel and do their best to fill potholes in their neighborhoods, partly because we haven't responded in ways that make sense. One of the things we should listen more to is those kind of neighborhood-based solutions, and think to ourselves, how can city government actually partner with people? Partner with folks who are doing that work. I saw something very similar in Toronto years ago around graffiti removal. There was a gentleman who every morning would get up, he put on his city issued vest, he would take materials and tools that were given him by the city and remove graffiti in his neighborhood on a regular basis. And when I asked him about it, he said, this is not something I do on my own. It's something I do with the support of the municipal government. So for me, I think there's plenty of opportunities to listen to what folks have to say. The last thing I'd say by way of an example is that during the period of the pandemic, City Hall was closed. We had city council meetings as well as school board meetings and board of supervisor meetings by Zoom. So I think there's a way to use a hybrid approach to continuing to let people participate on a virtual platform, make sure that we have in-person meetings, and that we figure out the best ways to facilitate and manage those conversations so we get the best of both worlds, in person and virtually. And I think that's the beginning of ways to really engage people as we go forward in our community.
This response is in regards to the community engagement question. As mayor, it will be a critical goal of my administration to greatly increase civic engagement across the whole city. As part of my public safety plan, I plan to increase resources allocated to neighborhood councils so we can increase our community input into the planning processes. And not just that, but the day-to-day issues that are happening on the ground in each unique neighborhood. Our communities will be safer when we have more Oaklanders engaged in all aspects of their community. I have seen in my own district that when you are able to activate your local public spaces by bringing people out to use them, they become safer. We can do so much more together when we work with our neighbors on our shared goals for Oakland. And as mayor, I plan to be out in our community, engaging with our citizens, as that's the only way we'll have a more equitable, just, and safer Oakland. When the mayor and our administrators and department heads are aware of what's going on in all neighborhoods in Oakland, because they have firsthand responses to what's actually happening on the ground, that's how the city becomes effective. School closure is a perfect example of how we need more community engagement. OUSD made plans to close many schools without seeking the input of the impacted communities. And of course, the decisions that were made had the greatest impact on our Black, Brown, and low-income families. I was the sole council member who is running for mayor, who not only worked to prevent closures and improve the process for families and students, but also went out and sought state resources to bridge the financial gap for OUSD. I reached out to Assembly Member Mia Bonta, and with her help and support, we were able to get $10 million in additional funds so that the financial crisis could be averted temporarily while leaders at OUSD tried to work out and figure out what the next steps are. However, we need real community input in decision-making and planning for all our neighborhoods. I will work to improve how we gather feedback and engage with our community members, and not just that, but ensure, like how I do in my district, that that feedback is not only gathered, but that it is actually being implemented. Under a Tao administration, we will work together with our diverse communities to have a shared vision for a safer, greener, healthier Oakland that works better for all of us.
Any solution intended to support our community has to be done in partnership with that community that will be benefited, or hopefully benefiting, from what's brought forward. Nothing about us but without us can be for us. I truly believe that. And that has been modeled in how I have engaged as a council member when it comes to developing solutions for my constituents and for the city overall. You don't have to look any further than the role that I played architecting and then co-chairing the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force. When it came down to it, it was critical for me that we include those individuals, those residents, those communities that are most impacted by the decisions that we were developing. And so we brought together more than 140 Oaklanders from across the city, representing all walks of life, but centering specifically on those who have been criminal justice involved, those who have been victims of violent crime, those who are more close to the solutions, the needs, the challenges of reimagining our public safety system, keeping residents safe while also moving towards a more equitable and just system. And so through that process, we not only engaged residents from across the city, all zip codes, all districts, residents of different demographics, Black, white, Latino, Asian, and beyond, those with different experiences interfacing with the public safety system, but also we looked across age demographics as well. We had a youth advisory panel, in addition to outreach that we did with older individuals and even our elders. It was through that process that we came up with more than 35 recommendations on how we keep our community safe while also creating a better public safety system that we all agree that we needed to have. That is exactly how I intend to lead as Oakland's next mayor, engaging broadly across our city, all perspectives, all demographics, but focusing on those most impacted by the decisions that are being made, coming up with ideas, solutions, co-creating, and then implementing in partnership. Because that's the only way we can create solutions that maintain the long-term success and effectiveness. So that's what I commit to, and I look forward to working with you, the Brotherhood of Elders, and so many others in partnership as we realize the Oakland that we deserve and need.
After the November election, there will be 3 new Oakland School Board members. Outline your perspective on the successes and challenges of the working relationship between OUSD and the City of Oakland. What would be your priorities in collaborating with OUSD? Specifically, what role and responsibility do you think City Hall has in closing the racial and ethnic disparity in graduation rates and UC-CSU eligibility?
So this question is around education. The question reads, after the November election, there will be 3 new Oakland School Board members. Outline your perspective on the successes and challenges of working relationship between OUSD and the City of Oakland. What would be your priorities in collaborating with OUSD? Specifically, what role and responsibility do you think City Hall has in closing the racial and ethnic disparity in graduation rates in UC and CSU eligibility? This is a terrific question. Although the city is autonomous from OUSD, it is, absolutely ridiculous that we are not working closer together. Some of the challenges that I can speak on is the fact that we don't work collaboratively enough. These are our babies. These are our families. This is our future, and we must invest in them in the way that we would like them to succeed when they are adults. And so as your mayor, I will intentionally work with OUSD to ensure that there are different pathways for what looks like success, including vocational training. And not just that, but making sure that all students, because we know that our Black, brown, low-income communities and ethnic Asian communities have a lot lower graduation rates than other groups. And so what that means is that we must ensure that every single school, high school, is running the curriculum of A through G and making sure that students are actually meeting that curriculum A through G. And I want to drop that D. I want to drop that D because the D is not a passing grade. And so making sure that we are intentional about ensuring that our kids are going to be the strongest in regards to when they apply for and are eligible for UCs and CSUs. But at the same time, as a student who didn't go straight to college myself, what about that population that needs to actually get into the workforce immediately because of, for whatever reason, whether they're not ready or whether they feel like they can't pay for it or whether they feel as if they need to actually take care of their younger siblings immediately, whatever reason, we must ensure that there are pathways for that group too. And that's why I also want to start a year-round paid internship program, not just with the city, but with other bigger businesses too, like Clorox and Pandora in the city of Oakland, because we know that when we open our young people up to social networks, that they also increase their social net worth. And so that is what it's about. It's about making sure that our young people have the ability to access opportunities and make sure that they reach success, however it looks for them. And sometimes it will be college, and other times it will be good paying job where they can sustain their family here in Oakland, because that's how we thrive. We thrive when all families are successful.
I'd like to respond to your concerns about public education. As a former school board member for 8 years, I understand that this issue is near and dear to our hearts and minds. Without a good K-12, and for that matter, good K-16 system, our young people won't get the skills, the exposure, the access to meaningful work, whether it's a career in someone else's business or as entrepreneurs. I believe that over the years, our failure to create a strong partnership between the city, the school district, as well as the county has hurt us in coming up with the solutions to creating a sustainable set of schools that are creating culturally competent, safe, and enriched learning environments for every Oakland student. First, I think we need to create a partnership for Oakland schools and advocate for a public-private investment to fully finance our community schools, to take the surplus that we've seen in the state of California for those community schools and create programs for after school using our park and rec facilities, character development opportunities, and use $200 million for fiscal year 23 to 27 to create that partnership. Number two, I think we need to elevate parent and student voices. I would propose, and if elected mayor, I would sponsor a citywide education summit to reinvent how education is done in Oakland. Because while we protect schools like Park Elementary and other schools, there are a lot of schools in Oakland that aren't serving our kids. A lot of schools in Oakland who aren't giving our kids the education they deserve from a culturally competent place so that African American children understand not just their history and culture, but the history and culture of our Latinos. Who are our family members, our Asian Pacific Islanders, our Native American brothers and sisters. Every child in Oakland should understand their history and culture as well as the history and culture of others. And so I think that as part of elevating parent and student voice, we should direct the Department of Race and Equity to partner with OUSD's Office of Equity to evaluate which schools can serve us the best. I think we need to invest in an assessment of the finances of the district using possibly our city auditor or some outside entity that people trust so that we can get on the same page around what we believe to be our financial situation so that we can create the schools that we need. And to do this in an ongoing dialogue between the Oakland education stakeholders and the city. And then lastly, I think we need to invest in a Healthy Minds master plan for kids. COVID has done severe damage to the mental health of a lot of our young people. We need to augment the macro program to encourage more culturally appropriate responses and give us more social, emotional, and learning opportunities and supports, and partner as well with the county's Office of Behavioral Health to do more to make sure that kids and families are connected to essential mental health coverage, both traditional Western modalities as well as culturally based ones. I think it's in those ways that we'll reimagine an education system that prepares caring, competent, and equipped young people to be part of our city.
I'm Elisa Victory Villanueva, and I'm running to be Oakland's next mayor. I'm already partnering with the majority of the school board candidates running alongside me this November and talking to voters in partnership about the need for united leadership in our city as well as our school board because we both serve Oakland's families and youth. The challenges are legal separation of our entities in terms of our budgeting, our power and control, as well as long-standing problems in both the city and the school board with fiscal accountability and transparency and community engagement. Successes that we've already seen with our city and our school board partnering are providing free computers and digital access, having free meal programs at our schools as well as at our libraries, youth employment and internship programs, college funding, and our crossing guard programs to make sure our schools are safe. My priorities as mayor are to sustain these existing investments and to expand them, to include adequate access and servicing of our parks and recreation, to partner with our school board to bring more access to mental health services, counseling, trauma-informed care, especially through our city's Department of Violence Prevention, and working with our city's Youth Advisory Commission. With the new mayor, new council, and new school board being elected this November, we have nothing but an opportunity to forge stronger relationships, stronger visions, and planning to ensure that we reach our goals of high-quality education for all Oaklanders. New leadership in each agency will hopefully not tie us to the status quo and repeating failed policies, but bring about new and fresh ideas and new energy and willingness to innovate and to work together. Our city must demand racial justice in all that we are doing, as well as other agencies that are touching our city and its residents. The racial disparities in our public education system are long-standing and widespread. I have been an advocate for reparative policy and investment in our Black students, in our underserved schools and neighborhoods throughout Oakland. The city has an obligation to do our part, to keep our streets safe around our schools, to clean up the illegal dumping and the blight with real trash and sanitation service, to have crossing guards, to have slow streets and road diets so that our pedestrians and people picking up their children are safe. We have an obligation to work with our transit systems to ensure that people can get to school, can get to work at these schools. We have an obligation as a city to, again, keep our parks and our recreation centers cleaned, opened, and staffed, including our libraries and other learning spaces. We have opportunities to engage our youth through employment, through internships, through job training and other development. I'm a product of that investment in Oakland's youth. I will empower our Department of Race and Equity and our Youth Advisory Commission to work closer with our stakeholders, including the Oakland Unified School District and our Peralta Community College District. I'm Elisa Victory Villanueva. Learn more at victoryforoakland.com.
Answer to question number 8, education. Back in the 1960s, I participated in a self-organized study group of high school students in Harlem in New York City. These high school students were inspired to study history and world politics because they were inspired by the liberation struggles of that time, including the civil rights movement. I believe that is what will inspire Oakland students today, and we need to introduce such relevant material into the curriculum. We also need extra resources given to all so-called low-performing schools, including lower class sizes and higher pay for teachers. In addition, I've been involved in the various campaigns to oppose shutting down various Oakland schools, as well as supporting strikes of Oakland teachers. And I would also help build and lead a campaign against privatization of the Oakland schools.
As a product of Oakland Public Schools, the son of a product of Oakland Public Schools, and who is raising a product of Oakland Public Schools, our public education system is extremely important to me. It is a priority that we do all we can to help all of our kids succeed, and we are failing them. When we have schools where 75% of the students are performing below grade level, that is a problem. We have to do better. We have to focus on outcomes, moving our kids from below grade level to grade level and beyond, preparing them for ultimate success from college, through college, career, or whatever path they choose. We can't simply give up on kids, pass them along without being prepared for life that's ahead of them. And so, yes, I subscribe to the fact that we in the city have a role to play in education, even though we are not the school board or the school district. When it comes to early childhood education, preparing our babies to enter school, we have our Head Start program. We can make other investments, our partnership with the Oakland Promise. We also support after-school programs, spending more than 3% of our general fund dollars towards supporting youth and families so that they can get the support, the resources they need, either through after-school programs at school on site, through other community-based organizations that are supporting these young people in getting access to new extracurricular activities, access to resources, youth employment, those things that complement what happens during the school day. It's also critical that we partner with our school district allies so that we can support them when they are working through challenges. Like when I was on the council early on, my first year, we decided to make an investment of our general fund dollars into restorative justice programs at the schools to help our young people build the resiliency they need for conflict resolution, to help reduce crime and fights and other altercations in school. It's also important that as we move forward, we're intentional in advocating collectively for more resources for our city so that we make Oakland Unified School District, make the city of Oakland the most attractive place for parents to send their children to school, for children to grow up and thrive and develop into their full potential. That's what I'm committed to doing as a partner, an advocate, and a champion for the education of all Oaklanders.
The ghost ship disaster highlighted the impacts of gentrification on Oakland's artistic community. What steps will you take to preserve art in the town?
Ghost ship fire, rest in peace, Alex G. A good friend of mine who died in the fire with his fiancee Hannah. Alex's mother, Emily, moved to Oakland and in her mourning because she wanted to be close to where her son died, and she moved into my home for months until she was able to find a place to live. So peace and blessings to Emily and the family of all those who lost lives in the ghost ship fire. It was a big tragedy for all of us, and I lost a few friends there as well. That should never happen. People should never be forced to live in those conditions. We've floated with different ghost ships every time we have a fire in a homeless encampment. There are currently 3 fires a day in Oakland's homeless encampment every single day. So we obviously haven't learned our lesson about creating appropriate living conditions and taking housing seriously when it comes to people who are artists. The heartbeat of Oakland and why we have so much soul is our art community. I founded Ocala Festival, art, music, and food. And we're known for many things we're known for, but what drives us is nothing is radical or revolutionary unless it's accessible to everyone. Oakland can't be radical or revolutionary unless it's accessible to everyone, especially our art community. So it's something I take seriously, and my actions have matched my ambition to up not only the vitality and visibility of the arts in Oakland, but also the accessibility of artists to be able to show their gifts to the people. So I will continue that energy as Oakland's mayor, make sure that Ocala gets there are many more Ocalas, and anyone who wants to start community festivals or arts programs will have ample funding. It's a big deal, and it's very hard to fund these festivals. So as someone who knows how difficult it is to deal with permits and starting businesses and fire department and making sure that people who want to vend also can jump and navigate those same things so they can do things legally. And how to navigate going from do-it-yourself and off the books, because there's nothing wrong with that, to a more professional business model is something that we need to do more of in Oakland. And it's something that our youth can benefit from. We need to bring the arts back to the schools. It's one thing that is really sad about Oakland is that we don't have the arts in our school anymore. We don't invest in those things. So we need to renew our commitment to arts and culture and music in the city of Oakland, not only for our children but for our neighbors.
Hi, the question that I'm going to answer now is around Oakland's artistic community. The question reads, the ghost ship disaster highlighted the impacts of gentrification on Oakland's artistic community. What steps will you take to preserve art in the town? Art for me is incredibly personal. My son had severe ADHD, and it is through his art that allows him to actually not be medicated. You know, it's very difficult when your child is crying to you, asking to be medicated. And then finding his art, you know, he's a musician. And when he plays music and has it in his life every single day as he goes to the Oakland School for the Arts, it has helped him to actually be able to be centered again, to really focus on his academics. And so I do believe that art is incredibly healing, and that arts should not only be held within certain geographic or certain schools and not others. It should be within all schools. But outside of just the schools, we have great artists, professional artists in the city of Oakland. And yet we are seeing that there is lack of resources, that the city does not actually invest in ensuring that artists can, one, live here, two, can actually showcase their art in a way where it's become more succinct and a part of the city, and three, not being intentional about how we can be a hub for people to come and visit the artwork and also purchase the artwork of Oaklanders. And so as Oakland's next mayor, that's exactly what I want to do. I want Oakland to be a hub for artists, so that when people are visiting the West Coast or visiting, you know, usually San Francisco, that they are also saying, we must go to Oakland. We must invest in not just the museums, the different various museums, we must also invest in our cultural zones, such as the Black cultural zone. More so than that, we can actually tie them together so there can be a way that people can come and visit Oakland. And then not just that, but experience the artistic work in Oakland. And when we talk about art, there are different ways, different kinds of art, right? We have scientific art, we have visual arts, we have musical arts, we have hands-on arts. And so all of this need to be captured and intentionally connected by local government as a way of ensuring that we do promote our artistry here in the city of Oakland. And at the same time, be intentional about building workforce housing so that our artist professionals can afford to continue to live here and be part of that fabric of Oakland that we so know and have developed so much talent from. Because our children and our young people need the mentorship of these professional artists.
Answer to question number 9, Oakland's artistic community. First of all, let's remember that after World War II, West Oakland was a cultural mecca. That crashed when various companies shut down and moved, creating massive unemployment in West Oakland, and also that was the basis for the rise of the drug problem in that part of Oakland. So, an arts program directly linked with the people of Oakland must be linked with the economy as a whole. We need guaranteed jobs at good union wages. We should renovate the old Oakland Auditorium to create a space for sports and the arts. That should be combined with my call for publicly funded housing. And again, I want to emphasize, none of this can come from above. It all has to be created through a movement from below to demand these resources for the working class people of Oakland and nationwide.
So I have to admit, as an engineer, I don't have the same artistic bug and gene that many amazing, talented Oaklanders have that have helped to put Oakland on the map. But I'm proud of my daughter, Cameron, who is an extremely talented dancer, dancing at Heat Dance Line, a program out of East Oakland, the studio in Foothill Square. The program that she's been able to participate in that hones her skills, develops her talent, and uses that as a vehicle for youth development and preparing her to become an adult. Those are programs that we have to have more of in our city. And we used to have them embedded in part of the schools. But we have to fill that gap so that our young people can really tap into their creativity, their innovation, their spirit, their talent, so that they can live into that while also being prepared academically and the other resources that we can provide. So yes, supporting our artistic community is critical and important. It is part of our lifeblood, it's part of our brand here in Oakland, and it is in so many ways fulfilling that promise, that legacy, that potential of our amazing town. We have to continue investing in the arts through our Arts Education Fund, through our Cultural Affairs Department here in the city. That's something I'm committed to doing as Oakland's next mayor. Partnering with local artists, letting them help guide the best, most effective way to invest and support those who are coming behind, themselves and those who are coming behind. Also, it's important that we look at those barriers that inhibit our artists from thriving. The lack of access to affordable housing, the lack of support in terms of investment into their craft and their trade. During the pandemic, I'm glad to have brought forward investments that not only brought relief for businesses that were experiencing a downturn, but also artists. I'm also grateful for the opportunity to partner with the Black Cultural Zone in East Oakland and other arts communities to strengthen them, support them, give them venues. Spirit Works and Artist Collective, I was able to work with them to get space for free and then deeply reduced access at Eastmont Town Center in one of the vacant storefronts so that it could be activated, used for arts promotion, community healing, growth, pulling community together when otherwise it would have sat vacant. Those are the things that we need to do in partnership, is creating more access to resources, education, and other supports that are needed for our artistic community as it grows and thrives and continues to put Oakland on the map.
I'd like to respond to your question and concerns about how we preserve our artistic community. As an artist, as a parent of artists, I'm deeply committed to preserving and nurturing a vibrant arts community and position Oakland as a national hub for artivism, and that is the connections between art and activism. I like to centralize art at the center of our community healing processes and use art as a lens to engage in our most pressing issues. I'd like to formalize and invest in establishing an emerging arts district. So we should establish a specific use plan that formalizes the detailed development standards and measures for the 14th Street Black Arts Movement and Business District, the Chinatown Cultural Heritage District, the Art and Garage District, the Jack London Maker District, and all of the other emerging art and culture centers that are part of Oakland. I think we need to invest in that cultural district policy in a way that preserves existing and encouraging more production, distribution, repair of arts, culture, and entertainment spaces like the Malanga Center. I think we need to expand the Cultural Arts Office's capacity to execute Oakland's cultural district policy framework and establish an arts community trust. I think, too, we need to have a blueprint for arts and culture and entertainment and direct the Office of Cultural Arts to organize an art summit to identify immediate and long-term financing and structural models to secure our cultural economy. That cultural economy can be a driver of the economic engine that we call Oakland's economy. And lastly, I think we need to bring equity and the cultural experience in a way that takes advantage of what happens in our schools to make sure that every student in the city has some exposure to cultural expression and that we incorporate cultural healing practices and art as medicine into the cultural affairs office grant program. I think those are among the things we need to do. We have an amazing arts community here that we should listen to, that we should support, that we should nurture, and make sure that they are housed personally, as well as live work spaces for galleries, for dance studios, and other ways to express the best of what Oakland is through our arts.
I'm Elisa Victory Villanueva, and I'm running to be Oakland's next mayor. Arts and culture is critical to Oakland's identity, to our history, and to our future. Yet so many artists have already been pushed out of their homes, their businesses, and are struggling to remain here. As a mayor who has been homeless in Oakland, I will approach our homelessness crisis with a human rights lens, with a goal to return people to dignified housing by expanding our shelter beds and using the emergency powers that we've had since 2018 to house people. I'll be fiscally responsible and transparent in how I am spending our homeless service dollars. Housing gentrification, the increased cost of housing and lack of affordability, impacts all of us. I'm a renter right now. I will preserve and enhance our existing programs, including affordable housing, and expand on programs like rental and mortgage assistance. I will invest in long-term solutions to our housing crisis, including creation of a public bank and implementation of a strong public lands policy so that our city can better control this fundamental need of housing. I will also invest in varied models of housing, including workforce housing and social housing. I'll expand our partnerships with Community Land Trust and other community-serving organizations to return more land to community control, public lands, and public good. I will preserve and expand our cultural business districts as well as our arts districts. To preserve arts in Oakland, I will build on our 2018 Cultural Development Plan. I will increase the presence and investments in public art programs, public art installations, and expand the reach of our Cultural Affairs Commission by partnering with other commissions, other city departments, with our county, and with private artists. I will include independent artists and art venues in our local business assistance programs and enhance their employment opportunities. I will expand more artists in residence, art fellowships, art ambassadors to help people navigate the artistic history of our city. I will expand our public art because that adds value to our city's cultural, aesthetic, and economic vitality. Art fosters civic pride, belonging, and tells important stories of the various neighborhoods and communities of our city. I will amplify these sites, our history, our culture-keeping programs, and our culture keepers throughout the city, and preserve our cultural districts citywide. I will also increase our funding and our partnership with our school districts and other agencies to bring arts and arts programs to our youth as well as to our seniors. I'm Elisa Victory Villanueva. You can learn more at victoryforoakland.com.